In the shadow of the Rockies, Clara Weston committed the unforgivable sin. She defied her father. When she refused to marry the wealthy rancher he'd chosen, Samuel Weston delivered his verdict. He sent her to live with Levi Hale, the silent mountain boy whose parents had frozen to death years ago. The town called him worthless. Clara called him her sentence. Their new home was barely standing, a forgotten cabin with holes in the roof and dirt for a floor. Clara's tears fell freely that first night as wind whistled through broken walls. But when morning came, Levi quietly offered her a hammer. Would this punishment become the very thing that finally sets them both free? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Clara Weston stared at her reflection in the cracked mirror propped against the cabin wall. Her auburn hair, normally pinned in elegant coils, hung in loose waves down her back. 2 days in this mountain prison, and already she felt herself changing, diminishing. She tugged at her once pristine traveling dress, now smudged with dirt and soot. Back at Weston Ranch, she'd have had 5 dresses just for morning wear alone. Her lady's maid would have heated water for a proper bath, not the frigid creek water her reluctant host had pointed to with a grunt. "Insufferable," she whispered, thinking not of the primitive conditions, but of her father's thunderous face as he'd practically thrown her from his carriage. "You'll thank me when this stubbornness is finally broken." Samuel Weston had declared, "1 month with Hale will have you begging to marry Howard Spencer." Clara's jaw tightened. She'd rather live in this squalor forever than marry that grabbing, pompous fool. Outside, the steady rhythm of chopping wood continued. Levi Hale had barely spoken 10 words since her arrival. He'd simply shown her the cabin, indicated where she could sleep, and resumed his endless chores. Clara had been raised hearing whispers about the mountain boy, his parents' tragic death in a blizzard, how he'd somehow survived alone, appearing in town only to trade furs and game. The ladies at church socials called him wild. The men called him worse, yet nothing had prepared her for his quiet intensity. Levi moved with purpose, wasting no motion or words. His dark eyes seemed to take everything in, revealing nothing in return. Clara jumped at a sudden knock on the door frame. Levi stood there, a bundle of kindling in his arms. "Fire's dying," he said simply, nodding toward the small stone fireplace. Clara crossed her arms. "I don't know how to tend it." Something flickered across his face. Surprise, perhaps, or disbelief. "Never needed to," she added defensively. Levi set down the wood and crouched by the hearth. His movements were methodical as he arranged kindling atop the embers. From his pocket, he withdrew a knife, worn wooden handle, blade polished from years of use. With practiced strokes, he shaved curls of wood from a small branch. "Catches better," he explained, noticing her watching. The first complete sentence he'd offered, Clara moved closer, curious despite herself. "That knife, it looks old." "My father's." 2 words, yet she heard volumes in them. He worked silently, building the fire with a craftsman's precision. Soon flames danced merrily, pushing back the mountain chill. Clara settled on a rough-hewn stool, extending her hands toward the warmth. Her stomach growled audibly. Levi glanced at her, then to the small table where yesterday's hard bread sat untouched. "You didn't eat." "I couldn't," Clara admitted. "I don't know how to prepare anything." Again that flicker in his eyes. He stood, retrieving a pot and moving to the door. "Where are you going?" Panic edged into her voice. Being alone was worse than his silent presence. "Creek, water." He paused, seeming to consider something. "You can come, learn." Clara hesitated, looking at her impractical shoes. With a sigh, she followed him into the afternoon light. The creek burbled cheerfully just beyond the cabin clearing. Levi knelt, filling the pot in a small pool where the water ran clear. Clara watched, noting how he avoided stirring up silt. "Upstream for drinking," he said. "Downstream for washing." Simple wisdom, Clara thought. Knowledge she'd never needed. Back inside, Levi added roots and dried meat to the pot, hanging it over the fire. From a small pouch he sprinkled in herbs. "What is that?" Clara asked. "Wild thyme, onion grass," He stirred with a carved wooden spoon. Makes the taste better. Clara observed his efficient movements. This mountain man knew more about cooking than she did. The thought both humbled and irritated her. Later, as they silently shared the simple stew, Clara studied Levi's profile in the firelight. His features might have been handsome if not for their severe set, jaw always tight, eyes watchful. "Why did you agree to this?" she finally asked. "Taking in your enemy's daughter?" Levi's spoon paused halfway to his mouth. "Your father isn't my enemy. He thinks the worst of you. Most do." No bitterness colored his words, just simple acknowledgement. "Then why?" Levi set down his bowl. His fingers absently traced the handle of the knife at his belt. "Cabin needs work. Winter's coming." He glanced at her hands, soft and unmarked by labor. 4 hands better than 2. Clara almost laughed at the practicality. "I'm afraid these hands don't know how to do much. They can learn." His eyes met hers directly for the first time. "If they want to." Something in his gaze, not pity, not judgment, but a simple assessment, made Clara sit straighter. "I suppose they must," she replied, surprising herself with her resolve. Levi nodded once, then resumed eating. No more words passed between them, but something had shifted, like the first crack in winter ice. Outside, darkness gathered as the mountain winds whispered secrets to the ancient pines. Clara listened, wondering what tales they might tell of the silent man across from her, and what story was yet to be written in this unexpected chapter of her life. 3 days had become a week. Clara's hands, once soft and unblemished, now bore angry red blisters from her first attempts at washing clothes in the creek. The cold water had numbed her fingers until she could barely feel the coarse soap slipping away. "Stupid, useless things," she muttered, looking at her trembling hands. Even the simplest tasks defeated her. Yesterday, she'd spilled half their drinking water trying to carry it from the creek. This morning, she'd nearly set the cabin ablaze, attempting to build up the fire alone. Worst of all was Levi's response. No scolding, no impatience, just that steady gaze and quiet correction. His competence made her failures more humiliating. Clara slumped against a pine tree, exhaustion settling into her bones. A week ago, she'd been reading French poetry in her father's parlor. Now she couldn't even manage to wash a simple shirt. Her blue traveling dress, the last clean garment she possessed, caught on a jagged branch as she stood. The sound of tearing fabric echoed like gunshot in the quiet forest. "No!" Clara examined the long rip along the side seam, edges frayed beyond any simple mending. Tears welled in her eyes, then spilled over. It wasn't just about the dress. Something inside her snapped. Without thinking, she gathered her skirts and began walking, away from the cabin, away from Levi's knowing eyes, away from this life she'd been thrust into. The mountain path sloped downward. Town lay that way, she knew. 15 miles of rugged trail, but surely better than this slow death of dignity. Her father had been wrong. She wouldn't crawl back begging for Howard Spencer. She'd find work, perhaps as a schoolteacher or companion to an elderly lady. Anything but this. Clara had managed perhaps 2 miles when dark clouds rolled over the peaks. The temperature dropped suddenly as fat raindrops began pelting through the canopy. She quickened her pace, but the path grew treacherous, mud slicking under her impractical shoes. A clap of thunder startled her. She slipped, tumbling down a short embankment, her dress catching and tearing further. Rain poured now, soaking through her clothes in seconds. Clara huddled against a boulder, shivering violently. Foolish. So foolish to leave without preparation, without knowing the way. "Clara!" Levi's voice carried through the downpour. Relief and shame battled within her as his tall figure emerged through the curtain of rain. "Going somewhere?" he asked, crouching beside her. No accusation in his tone, just that maddening calm. "Town," she said through chattering teeth. 15 miles. No food. Storm coming." He stated these facts without judgment. "You'd have died. Better than living like this." The words burst from her. "I'm useless here. I can't cook or clean or carry water. I can't even wash clothes without ruining my hands. My father was right. I'm nothing but a pampered, useless—" "Stop!" Levi's voice remained quiet, but something in it silenced her. "You've had 7 days. I've had 7 years." Clara blinked at him through rain-soaked lashes. "Took me 3 months to make fire properly," he continued, offering his hand. 6 to trap without checking empty snares. A year to build that cabin." She hesitated, then took his outstretched hand. His calloused palm enveloped her blistered one. "I didn't ask for you," Levi said as he helped her stand, "any more than you asked for me." The simple truth of this struck Clara silent. In her self-pity, she'd forgotten he'd had no choice in this arrangement either. "But here we are," he added, shrugging off his coat and draping it over her shoulders. The warmth of the rough wool engulfed her. It smelled of wood smoke and pine. Not unpleasant, she realized with surprise. They walked in silence, Clara stumbling occasionally on the slick path. Each time, Levi's hand appeared at her elbow, steadying without lingering. Back at the cabin, he built up the fire while Clara huddled beside it, still wrapped in his coat. When her shivering subsided, he handed her a bundle of clothing. Simple men's garments, worn but clean. "All I have," he said, "until we can dry yours." Clara clutched the bundle, the reality of her situation settling over her like a heavy blanket. No more running away. No magical rescue. "Thank you," she said softly. Levi nodded, turning to give her privacy. As Clara changed behind the rough blanket they'd hung as a partition, she examined her ruined blue dress. Beyond salvage, like the life she'd left behind, she emerged in Levi's too large shirt and trousers, rolled at wrists and ankles. A silent acknowledgement passed between them. Something had shifted, a first surrender to what was, rather than what had been. Outside, the storm raged on, but within the cabin walls, a fragile truce had formed. Like this? Clara positioned her hands on the small hatchet, mimicking Levi's grip. He nodded, watching as she swung tentatively at the kindling. The wood split with a satisfying crack. Not perfectly, but usable. "Better," he said. 2 weeks had passed since her failed escape attempt. Each morning since, Clara had risen before dawn, determined to master one new skill. Her blisters had hardened into calluses. Her once soft hands now told stories of work and perseverance. "I want to learn everything," she'd announced the morning after the storm. Levi had simply nodded as if expecting nothing less. They established a routine. Mornings for gathering water and firewood. Afternoons for foraging and repairs. Evenings for preparing food and mending. Clara followed Levi's lead, observing his efficient movements, asking questions when necessary. Today, having finally mastered basic fire tending, she watched him work on something small by the hearth. His whittling knife moved in smooth, controlled motions across a piece of pine. "What are you making?" she asked, settling beside him. "Spoon." He displayed the half-formed utensil. "We need another." Clara studied the graceful curve, taking shape beneath his blade. "Could I try to make something useful?" Surprise flickered across his features, the slight widening of eyes, a momentary pause in his rhythm. He considered her request, then reached into his pocket and withdrew a smaller knife. "My first one," he explained, handing it to her. "Blade's not as sharp. Safer for learning." The handle fit comfortably in her palm, worn smooth from years of use. Clara felt oddly honored to be entrusted with something so personal. Levi selected another piece of pine, demonstrated the basic grip and cutting motion, then passed it to her. "Always cut away from yourself," he cautioned. Her first attempts were clumsy, the wood refusing to yield the way it did for Levi. Frustration mounted as she nearly sliced her finger. "Patience," Levi murmured. "Wood has its own ideas. Work with it, not against it." Clara took a deep breath, remembering the disaster with the laundry, the spilled water, the countless failures of her first days. She'd overcome those. This was just one more skill to master. She adjusted her grip, focusing on smaller, more controlled cuts. Slowly, almost reluctantly, the wood began to take shape beneath her blade. "The grain tells you where to cut," Levi explained, his voice low and steady. "See how it flows? Follow that." Clara nodded, finding unexpected peace in the repetitive motion. The cabin filled with the soft sound of their knives against wood and the occasional pop from the fire. Hours passed. The afternoon light shifted to evening gold. Clara's shoulders ached, but she persisted, determined to finish. When she finally set down the knife, her creation barely resembled a spoon, the bowl too shallow. The handle thick and ungainly. "It's terrible," she sighed. Disappointed after her hours of effort, Levi took it, examining her work with serious attention. "It'll hold stew," he declared. "That's what matters." Such a simple statement, yet Clara felt a flush of pride warm her cheeks. He was right, function over beauty. The mountain had different standards than Charleston finishing school. They cooked a simple dinner together, Clara growing more comfortable with the routine. When the rabbit stew was ready, Levi reached for their bowls, then paused. He served himself with his old spoon, then deliberately filled her bowl and handed it to her along with her newly carved creation. "First use," he said quietly. Clara dipped her misshapen spoon into the stew, oddly moved by the gesture. The utensil performed its humble task, despite its imperfections. They ate in companionable silence until Clara spoke. "My father would be scandalized to see me now because of the spoon. Because I'm learning to survive without servants, without luxury." She studied her calloused hands. "You never thought I could, can you?" Levi asked, his dark eyes intent. Clara considered the question seriously. 2 weeks ago, she'd been a pampered rancher's daughter, helpless outside her protected world. Now she could split wood, tend fire, and create rather than simply consume. "I'm beginning to think I can," she answered honestly. Something almost like a smile touched Levi's lips. "Good." After dinner, Clara placed her spoon carefully beside the fireplace. Not beautiful, but hers, made by her own hands. Perhaps the first truly useful thing she'd ever created. That night, lying on her simple pallet, Clara felt different, as if her body belonged to someone new. Muscles ached from honest work. Hands bore the marks of effort, rather than idleness. Tomorrow, she would learn something else. Build something more. For the first time since arriving, Clara fell asleep without thoughts of escape. The journey to town took 3 hours on Levi's old mare. Clara rode behind him, acutely aware of his broad back against her chest, the unfamiliar intimacy making her both uncomfortable and oddly secure. The necessity of holding his waist to keep her balance had ceased to feel scandalous after the first mile. "We'll need flour, salt, coffee if they have it," Levi said over his shoulder. "Anything else?" Clara considered. 3 weeks in the mountains had redefined her understanding of necessities. "Thread! My dress still needs proper mending," he nodded as they crested a hill. Below them, Pine Tree Valley spread out, hardly more than a single dirt road with scattered buildings. But to Clara's mountain-accustomed eyes, it seemed bustling. "They'll stare," Levi warned as they approached, "because I'm with you." Clara asked, "Because everyone knows your father sent you away." His voice remained neutral. "People talk." The town appeared exactly as Clara remembered from their brief stop when her father had deposited her with Levi. A general store, church, saloon, blacksmith, and handful of other businesses clustered along the main street. Several horses were hitched outside the general store. Levi helped Clara dismount before tying up their horse. His hands were strong but careful at her waist, setting her down with unexpected gentleness. "Ready?" he asked. Clara straightened her borrowed coat, another of Levi's, much too large but clean, and nodded. The bell above Harmon's general store jangled as they entered. Conversation instantly died. 6 pairs of eyes turned to stare. Mr. Harmon recovered first, his merchant's instinct for business overriding surprise. "Hale, been a while." Levi nodded, moving toward the counter with his list. Clara followed, feeling the weight of scrutiny on her back. 2 women near the fabric bolts whispered behind raised hands. Another, arranging preserves on a shelf, nearly dropped a jar when Clara looked her way. "My word, is that Samuel Weston's girl?" The whisper carried in the silent store. "Living in sin with that mountain savage," came the hushed reply. Heat flooded Clara's cheeks. She'd anticipated gossip, but the blatant assumption of impropriety stung. She and Levi maintained strictly separate spaces in the cabin, their relationship defined by mutual survival rather than anything inappropriate. Levi seemed not to hear, or perhaps was simply accustomed to such talk. He conducted his business efficiently, trading pelts for supplies. Clara busied herself examining spools of thread, attempting to ignore the whispers that followed her. She selected a sturdy brown spool and several needles, bringing them to the counter. "Put it on Hale's account," she told Mr. Harmon, whose eyebrows shot up in surprise. As Levi gathered their purchased goods, an older woman approached Clara. Her grey hair was pulled into a severe bun, her mouth set in what appeared to be a permanent frown. "Mrs. Weston, I'm Harriet Wheeler," she announced. "Church secretary. We've been most concerned about your situation." "Miss Weston," Clara corrected, "and I assure you there's no cause for concern. A young woman of your breeding, living unchaperoned with a man of his background." Mrs. Wheeler's eyes flicked dismissively toward Levi. "Reverend Mills would be happy to arrange more suitable accommodations with a respectable family." Clara felt rather than saw Levi stiffen beside her. "That's very thoughtful," Clara replied, her finishing school manners automatically engaging. "However, Mr. Hale has been a perfect gentleman. I'm quite comfortable with our arrangement." Mrs. Wheeler's expression suggested Clara had just confessed to dancing naked in the streets. "Your poor father must be beside himself," she clucked. Such a scandal. Something inside Clara hardened. "My father arranged this situation, Mrs. Wheeler. His exact words were that Mr. Hale would teach me the value of proper obedience. If there's scandal, it originated with him." The woman gasped softly. "Our supplies are ready," Levi said quietly, touching Clara's elbow. His expression revealed nothing, but Clara sensed his desire to leave. Outside, Clara exhaled shakily. "I apologize for that. I shouldn't have—" "You spoke truth," Levi interrupted, securing their purchases to the saddle. "No need to apologize." As they prepared to mount, the store door opened. Mr. Harmon hurried out, a paper-wrapped parcel in hand. "Nearly forgot," he said, handing it to Clara. "Some ladies left this for you." Her name was written across the brown paper in elegant script. Clara accepted it with cautious thanks. On the trail home, the parcel seemed to burn against her side. When they stopped to water the horse, she finally unwrapped it, finding a small Bible with a note tucked inside. "For guidance in your unfortunate circumstances. We pray for your moral salvation. Ladies' Aid Society." Clara stared at the presumptuous gift, then at Levi's impassive profile as he checked the horse's shoes. "They think I need saving from you," she said, showing him the note. Levi's eyes met hers, something unreadable flickering in their depths. "Do you?" Clara considered the quiet man before her, who had taught her to split wood rather than doing it for her, who left her the warmer side of the cabin without comment, who'd never once made her feel anything but respected. "No," she answered firmly, tucking the Bible into their supplies. "But I might need saving from their good intentions." For the first time, she heard Levi laugh, a short, rusty sound, as if long unused. The sound warmed her more than any town welcome could have. Clara stood on the newly repaired roof, hammer in hand, surveying their accomplishment. After a week of planning and 3 days of labor, the cabin no longer leaked when it rained. Her arms ached from hauling shingles, her back protested each movement, but pride overshadowed discomfort. "We did it," she breathed, wiping sweat from her brow. Levi nodded, gathering his tools. In the month since Clara's arrival, he'd shifted from doing tasks for her to working alongside her, teaching rather than providing. "Partnership rather than charity. Storm coming," he observed, glancing at gathering clouds. "Good timing," Clara smiled at his understatement. They'd worked from dawn till dusk to finish before the weather turned. Levi had insisted every shingle be properly secured, every seam carefully sealed. "Should hold through winter now," he added, something like satisfaction in his voice. Winter. The word hung between them, unexplored until now. Clara's father had sent her to Levi for 1 month to learn her lesson. That month ended tomorrow. Thunder rumbled in the distance as they descended the ladder Levi had constructed from pine logs. Clara's thoughts tumbled like the approaching storm clouds. Her father would likely send someone soon, expecting her to return, chastened and obedient, ready to marry Howard Spencer without complaint. Inside, they moved in comfortable synchrony, preparing their evening meal. Clara stirred the stew, while Levi sliced bread from their latest batch. The domesticity of their routine no longer felt strange. "Tomorrow makes a month," Clara said finally, voicing what had occupied her thoughts all day. Levi paused, knife suspended above the bread. "Yes, my father will expect me back." She kept her tone neutral, though her heart pounded oddly. Properly humbled by my time in the wilderness, rain began pattering against their new roof. Neither mentioned the satisfaction of staying dry, their thoughts occupied with more pressing matters. "Are you?" Levi asked after a lengthy silence. Humbled, Clara considered the question seriously as she served their meal. Was she the same person who had arrived in fine clothes, with soft hands and wounded pride? "Not humbled," she answered slowly. "Changed." They ate as the storm intensified, wind whistling around the cabin's corners. Their new roof held fast, not a single drop finding its way inside. "Will you go?" Levi finally asked, his deep voice barely audible above the storm. The question carried weight beyond its simple words. Clara studied him across the table, this quiet man who had become her teacher, her companion. No longer the mountain savage of town gossip, but Levi, just Levi. "Do you want me to?" She countered, suddenly needing to know. His dark eyes met hers, more open than she'd ever seen them. "No," one word spoken plainly. No elaboration, no persuasion, just truth. Clara released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Then I won't." Something shifted in Levi's expression, tension easing from his brow, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly. "Not quite a smile, but close. We should get word to your sister," he suggested. "Let her know you're well." Clara nodded, touched by his thoughtfulness. Emily would worry if Clara simply vanished from family knowledge. The storm reached its peak, rain hammering against the cabin. They cleared their dinner things in companionable silence, each absorbed in the implications of their brief exchange. Later, as Clara prepared for sleep in her sectioned-off corner of the cabin, she noticed something new on her pallet. A pillow, rough fabric stuffed with dried moss and pine needles, sewn with careful if inexpert stitches. She touched it wonderingly. In their weeks together, she'd complained only once about sleeping without a proper pillow. An offhand comment she thought he'd ignored. Levi was already in his bedroll on the opposite side of the cabin when she emerged from behind the partition. "You made this?" she asked softly. He glanced up, then away. "Thought it might help you sleep better." Such a simple thing, yet it represented something profound. Not just consideration for her comfort, but acknowledgement of her permanence. A pillow meant she was staying, that this was now her home too. "Thank you," she whispered, emotion tightening her throat. Levi nodded once, returning to checking his traps by firelight that night, as rain drummed steadily on their solid roof. Clara rested her head on the moss-stuffed pillow. Her father had sent her to the mountains as punishment. How strange that she'd found something here that felt remarkably like freedom. Tomorrow, she would begin thinking of how to tell her family of her decision. Tonight, she simply listened to the storm outside and Levi's steady breathing across the room, no longer counting the days until her sentence ended. The mountain air carried the first hint of autumn's chill. Clara wrapped her shawl, once Levi's old shirt, now repurposed, tighter around her shoulders as she sat on the cabin's front step. In her lap lay a precious sheet of paper, one of 3 they'd purchased on their last trip to town. Beside her, a small piece of charcoal Levi had shown her how to make from burned pine. Ink was a luxury they couldn't afford, but Clara was determined to write to Emily. 6 weeks had passed since her father had left her at this cabin. 2 weeks since she'd made the decision to stay. Each day brought new skills learned, new routines established. The cabin was slowly transforming, much like Clara herself. She touched the charcoal to paper, then hesitated. How to explain to her sister what she herself was only beginning to understand. "Dear Emily," she began, the charcoal smudging under her fingers, "I know Father has likely told you I am being stubborn and rebellious. Perhaps he's even said I am dead to the family as he threatened. I want you to know I am very much alive." Clara paused, considering her next words carefully. She couldn't write the whole truth, that she'd found unexpected peace in this simple life, that Levi had shown her kindness rather than the cruelty her father had intended. Such admissions would only confirm her family's worst fears. "My situation is not as dire as Father may have portrayed. I have shelter, food, and safety. Mr. Hale has been—" She stopped, unsure how to describe Levi. Gentleman seemed wrong for a man who skinned rabbits and built fires with his bare hands. Yet he had been unfailingly respectful, maintaining careful boundaries despite their close quarters. Respectful and instructive. "I've learned much about self-reliance." Clara grimaced at the formality of her words. How could she convey the profound shift in her perspective? How the daughter of Samuel Weston, who once complained when her bath wasn't properly scented, now bathed in a creek and thought nothing of it. She rubbed out several lines with her thumb and began again. "I miss you terribly, Em. I wish I could explain how everything has changed. I'm learning to see the world differently here. The mountains have their own kind of beauty, harsh but honest. There's dignity in work I never understood before." A shadow fell across her paper. Levi stood beside her, game bag over his shoulder, returning from checking his traps. "Writing home?" he asked, settling beside her on the step. Clara nodded. "To Emily, she worries. Levi studied the smudged paper. Hard to say everything in one letter." "Yes," Clara sighed. "How do I tell them I'm staying without sounding improper?" Levi considered this, his expression thoughtful. "Truth is usually best. That I prefer this cabin to Father's grand house? That I'd rather haul water and chop wood than attend tea parties?" Clara smiled ruefully. "They'd think I've gone mad. Maybe not Emily." Clara glanced at him, surprised. "You remember her name? You talk about her often." Levi reached into his pocket, producing a small cloth bundle. "Found these. Thought you might like them." Inside the bundle lay a handful of blackberries, plump and sweet. Clara accepted them gratefully, the simple gift more precious for its thoughtfulness. "Thank you." She offered him half, which he took with a nod. They sat in companionable silence, watching the afternoon light play across the clearing. After a moment, Levi spoke again. "Your sister might understand more than you think." Clara considered his words as she finished the berries. Perhaps he was right. Emily had always been the family peacemaker, seeing nuance where their father saw only black and white. With renewed purpose, Clara returned to her letter. "Dear Emily, I've started this letter a dozen times, unsure how to explain everything that's happened. The simple truth is this: I've decided to stay in the mountains, not out of stubbornness or spite toward Father, but because I've found something here I never knew I needed. Mr. Hale, Levi, has taught me to be self-sufficient in ways I never imagined possible. I can build a fire, mend clothing, even help repair a roof. Each day brings new challenges, but also new satisfactions. I know this decision will disappoint Father, and likely shock you too. Society would certainly condemn me, but for the first time in my life, I'm making choices based on what brings me peace rather than what others expect. Please try to understand, even if you can't approve. And please write to me if Father allows it. Letters can be sent to the general store in Pine Tree Valley. With all my love, Clara." She reviewed the smudged, imperfect letter. Like her new life, it wasn't pretty or proper, but it was honest. She folded it carefully, conscious of Levi's quiet presence beside her. "Will you help me take it to town tomorrow?" she asked. Levi nodded. First light. As dusk settled over the mountains, Clara felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The letter was insufficient to explain everything, but it was a beginning, the first thread connecting her new life to the old, allowing both to exist simultaneously in her heart. "Hold still," Levi instructed, positioning the rifle against Clara's shoulder. "Breathe in, then halfway out. Hold it there." Clara focused on the crude target he'd set up, a pine cone balanced on a distant stump. 2 months ago, the idea of handling a weapon would have horrified her. Now it seemed as natural as drawing water from the creek, steady, Levi murmured, his voice close to her ear. His hands adjusted her grip slightly. "When you're ready," Clara exhaled slowly, squeezed the trigger. The rifle's report echoed across the clearing. The pine cone remained untouched. "Almost," Levi said, no disappointment in his tone. Again, October had painted the mountains in fiery hues, the aspens shimmering gold against evergreen backdrops. With the changing colors came dropping temperatures. Game would soon grow scarce as animals prepared for winter. "We need to stock up," Levi had explained that morning. "Time you learned to hunt." 5 shots later, Clara finally connected with her target. The pine cone exploded into fragments. "I did it," she exclaimed, lowering the rifle with careful attention to the safety Levi had drilled into her. A rare smile touched his lips. "Good. Tomorrow we track deer." As they walked back to the cabin, Clara observed how Levi moved through the forest, eyes constantly scanning, feet finding silent paths through undergrowth. Once she would have seen him as wild, uncivilized. Now she recognized his deep connection to the land, his profound understanding of its rhythms. "You never told me how you survived after your parents died," she said, breaking their comfortable silence. "You were young, weren't you?" Levi nodded, his expression unreadable. 14, the same age as Emily," Clara noted softly. He was quiet for several steps. "Father taught me hunting, trapping before. After the storm took them, I just kept going." Such a simple description for what must have been years of solitary struggle. Clara's heart ached, imagining a boy alone in these mountains, with no one to comfort him. "The town didn't help?" she asked. A shadow crossed his face. "Some tried. Most figured I'd die like my folks. When I didn't, they decided I was strange, easier to avoid me." They reached the cabin as evening approached. Clara's coat, a cast-off of Levi's, altered to fit her smaller frame, caught on the doorframe, tearing loose 2 of its remaining buttons. "Sorry," she sighed, examining the damage. "I'll need to find replacements before winter." Later, as she prepared their evening meal, Clara noticed Levi working intently by the fire, his large hands manipulating something small. He'd found a shed deer antler on their walk home and was carving it with his knife. He worked through dinner, declining conversation with the single-minded focus Clara had come to recognize. Only as they finished cleaning up did he approach her, hand outstretched. "For your coat," he explained. In his palm lay 4 buttons, each carved from the antler. Clara picked one up, marveling at its craftsmanship. Each was identical in size, polished to a soft gleam, with a simple star pattern etched into its surface. "They're beautiful," she breathed, running her finger across the delicate carving. "Far better than the original buttons." Levi shrugged, uncomfortable with praise as always. "Practical. Bone lasts longer than wood." "Thank you," Clara said, closing her hand around the buttons. More than their functionality, she treasured the hours of careful attention they represented. The evening progressed with their usual routine, Levi mending traps while Clara sewed the buttons onto her coat. The fire crackled, casting warm light over their domestic scene. Outside, wind rustled through trees, carrying the promise of colder days ahead. "Winter comes early up here," Levi commented, testing a trap spring. "Need to finish the north wall insulation tomorrow." "I could help with that," Clara offered. "After our hunting lesson," Levi nodded, a tacit acceptance of her partnership in preparing their home for the harsh season ahead. Their home! The thought no longer seemed strange. Clara held up her coat, admiring the antler buttons catching the firelight. They suited the garment and her new life far better than the original plain wooden ones. "Will we be ready?" she asked, the question encompassing more than just winter preparations. Levi's eyes met hers across the cabin, his gaze steady and certain. Yes, one word, but it carried the weight of a promise. They would face the coming challenges together, their unlikely alliance growing stronger with each passing day. As Clara readied for sleep, she ran her fingers once more over the carved buttons. Such small things, yet they represented everything that had changed since her arrival. Like the antler transformed by Levi's skilled hands, she too had been reshaped. not diminished as her father had intended, but crafted into something more resilient, more authentic. She was no longer merely surviving her punishment. She was building a life, one carved button at a time. The first snow fell early, blanketing the mountains in pristine white. Clara watched it through the cabin window, mesmerized by the silent transformation of their world. What once seemed menacing forest now appeared magical, trees draped in crystalline mantles. "Beautiful," she murmured, her breath fogging the glass. Levi glanced up from splitting kindling. Dangerous, too. His practical assessment didn't diminish Clara's wonder. 3 months in the mountains had taught her to respect nature's dual nature, its beauty inseparable from its peril. They'd spent weeks preparing, curing meat, gathering and preserving late autumn berries, reinforcing the cabin walls with a mixture of mud and pine needles for insulation. Their cellar was stocked with potatoes, carrots, and turnips from the small garden they'd tended. Firewood was stacked nearly to the cabin's eaves. "We'll be comfortable enough," Levi had assured her, something like pride in his voice as they'd surveyed their preparations. The snowfall continued through the day, piling deeper as afternoon surrendered to evening. Clara helped Levi bring extra firewood inside, the exertion warming her despite the biting cold. "Last trip," Levi decided as darkness fell, the temperature plummeting further. Storms strengthening. That night, huddled near the fire, Clara felt a tickle in her throat. By morning, it had become a persistent cough. By midday, her body ached, her skin alternately burning and chilled. "Just a cold," she assured Levi, whose brow furrowed with concern. But by evening, Clara could barely stand. Her lungs felt heavy, each breath a struggle. Viva glazed her eyes as Levi helped her to her pallet. "Sleep," he urged, covering her with every available blanket. Through the night, Clara drifted between consciousness and fevered dreams. Her mother appeared, stroking her hair as she had when Clara was small. Then Emily, reading aloud as she often did during their childhood illnesses. Even her father materialized, his stern face unusually gentle. Occasionally, she surfaced to find Levi beside her, his large hand supporting her head as he urged her to sip broth or herbal tea. His face, normally so composed, betrayed his worry. "Don't leave," she mumbled once, capturing his hand as he turned away. "I'm here," came his steady reply, days blurred together. Clara's world narrowed to the rhythm of her labored breathing and the cool touch of a damp cloth on her forehead. Through her delirium, she became aware of Levi's constant presence, his low voice murmuring reassurances, his hands adjusting blankets, his careful ministrations with the fever cloth. Once, she awakened to find him asleep beside her pallet, sitting upright against the wall, his hand still loosely holding the damp cloth. Exhaustion had carved deeper lines around his eyes. "Levi," she whispered, her throat raw. He startled awake immediately. "What do you need?" "You should rest properly." Her voice emerged as a frail rasp. "I'm fine." He dipped the cloth in a basin of melted snow, wrung it out, and placed it gently on her forehead. The coolness felt heavenly against her burning skin. "How long?" she asked. 4 days. His response was clipped, but concern softened his eyes. "Fever broke last night." Clara tried to sit up, shocked by her weakness. 4 days? You've been caring for me all this time." Levi shrugged, uncomfortable with her attention. "You'd do the same." The simple statement warmed her more than the fire. He was right. She would have done the same for him. When had that become true? When had this taciturn mountain man become someone whose well-being mattered so deeply to her? "My mother died of fever," Clara said softly, "when I was 12. I was so afraid." "I know." Levi re-wet the cloth. "You talked in your sleep." Clara's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "What else did I say?" Something flickered across his features, discomfort perhaps, or uncertainty. "Nothing important." But the way he avoided her eyes suggested otherwise. As Clara's strength gradually returned over the next 2 days, she noticed subtle changes in Levi's behavior. His customary reserve seemed heightened, yet he remained attentive to her needs. He prepared broths with special care, adding wild herbs to strengthen her recovery. When she finally managed to sit at the table for a proper meal, relief visibly relaxed his tense shoulders. "Thank you," Clara said that evening, watching him tend the fire. "For taking care of me," Levi nodded without turning. "Rest more tomorrow." "Still weak, Levi." Something in her tone made him finally face her. "What did I say?" "When I was delirious," he hesitated, fingers working the worn fabric of the fever cloth he still carried in his pocket. "You called for your mother, your sister." A pause. "Your father, and—" His eyes met hers briefly, then dropped. "You said you felt safe here." "With me," Clara's heart quickened. Had she revealed more than that? The complicated feelings that had been growing within her, feelings she herself was only beginning to understand. "It's true," she said simply. "I do feel safe with you." Levi nodded once, accepting her words without comment. Yet Clara thought she detected a subtle easing in his manner, as if some unspoken concern had been addressed. Outside, snow continued falling, sealing them in their mountain sanctuary. Clara watched Levi move about his evening tasks, his presence no longer strange or frightening, but essential to her sense of home. December arrived with unrelenting cold and snowdrifts that sometimes reached the cabin's windows. Clara had fully recovered from her illness, though Levi still watched her with quiet vigilance when she ventured outside. Their world had contracted to the cabin's four walls, the isolation more complete than Clara had ever experienced. Yet surprisingly, she rarely felt the press of boredom or confinement that she'd once feared. Days assumed a rhythm, dictated by necessity and daylight. Mornings for essential chores, melting snow for water, tending the fire, checking Levi's nearby traps. Afternoons for indoor tasks, mending, carving, preserving. Evenings for rest and conversation. It was during these long evenings that Clara discovered a new side of her quiet companion. After dinner one night, while organizing their meager shelf of supplies, she found a battered book wedged behind a container of salt. "Robinson Crusoe," she read aloud, surprised. The binding was cracked, the pages yellowed and dog-eared. "I didn't know you had books." Levi glanced up from the snare he was repairing. "Was my father's." Clara opened it carefully, finding an inscription on the inside cover. "To Jonathan Hale. May you find wisdom in these pages." Christmas 1845. "Your father was Jonathan." Levi nodded, his hands continuing their practiced movements with the wire snare. "Have you read it?" Clara asked, settling beside the fire. "Can't." His admission came without shame, a simple statement of fact. "Father started teaching me letters after he died." He shrugged. "Never finished learning." Clara processed this revelation. In her world, literacy was taken for granted. Even ranch hands and housemaids could generally read simple texts. She'd never considered that Levi might not have this basic skill. "Would you like me to read it to you?" she offered impulsively. Levi's hands stilled. He looked at her with an unreadable expression. "Why?" "The evenings are long." "And it's a wonderful adventure story," she smiled. "About a man who survives alone on an island, somewhat like you on your mountain." A flicker of interest crossed his face. "My father used to read it before bed." Clara opened to the first page. "The Life and Adventures of Robinson Crusoe, written by himself." That night began a new tradition. Each evening after their chores, Clara would read aloud for an hour, her voice filling the cabin while Levi worked on various projects. He listened intently, occasionally asking about words he didn't understand. As days passed, Clara noticed him drawing closer during reading time, abandoning his usual position across the cabin to sit within better hearing distance. His questions became more frequent, more engaged. Why would he take a slave? Levi asked one evening as the story introduced Friday. "Man should be free." Clara paused, struck by his moral clarity. Some people believed they had the right to own others back then. Some still do. "Wrong," Levi said simply. His forthright judgment made Clara smile. For all his isolation from society, Levi possessed an innate sense of justice that many civilized men lacked. One night, halfway through the book, Clara's voice grew hoarse from reading. Levi silently prepared a cup of pine needle tea with honey, a precious commodity they used sparingly, and placed it beside her. "Thank you," she said, touched by his thoughtfulness. "Thank you," he countered, gesturing to the book, "for the words." As the story progressed over subsequent evenings, Clara found herself watching Levi's reactions as much as the pages. His face, normally so impassive, revealed subtle shifts of emotion: concern when Crusoe faced dangers, satisfaction when he mastered new skills. "You're like him, you know," Clara commented one night, closing the book at their usual stopping point. "Resourceful, self-sufficient," Levi considered this. "Difference is, he wanted rescue. Wanted to go back, and you don't?" Clara asked softly. His eyes met hers across the firelit space between them. "Not anymore." The simple admission hung in the air, laden with meaning neither was quite ready to articulate. "What about you?" Levi asked after a moment. "Do you want rescue?" Clara thought about her father's grand house, the society gatherings, the structured life she'd once led. Then she looked around the small cabin. At the table they'd repaired together, the herbs hanging from rafters, the handmade curtains separating their sleeping spaces. "No," she answered honestly. "This doesn't feel like exile anymore." Levi nodded, understanding what she wasn't quite saying. This shared life, built from necessity, had somehow become a choice for both of them. That night, after they'd retired to their respective sides of the cabin, Clara heard Levi's voice in the darkness. "Clara?" "Yes," a pause. "What happens to Robinson in the end? Does he stay or go?" Clara smiled into the darkness, touched by his investment in the story. "He goes back to civilization, but he's forever changed by his time alone." Levi was silent for so long that Clara thought he might have fallen asleep. Then, barely audible, "Some changes can't be undone." Clara pulled her blankets closer, considering his words. The Clara who had arrived months ago in fine clothes and indignation no longer existed. Like Crusoe, she had been transformed by her exile, finding strength and purpose she never knew she possessed. And like Crusoe, she suspected she could never truly go back to what she had been before. The knock came during a howling January storm. Clara and Levi exchanged startled glances. Visitors in such weather were unheard of. Levi reached for his rifle, positioning Clara behind him as he approached the door. "Who's there?"
"Emily Weston,"
came a muffled feminine reply. "Clara's sister." Clara pushed past Levi, throwing open the door to reveal a snow-covered figure. Emily's face appeared above layers of scarves and coats, her cheeks bright red from cold. "Emily." Clara pulled her sister inside, brushing snow from her clothes. "What on earth are you doing here? How did you even find us in this storm?" Emily shed her outer garments, revealing a small, determined young woman with Clara's auburn hair and their father's stubborn chin. "Mr. Peterson from the general store gave me directions. I hired him to bring me in his sleigh." She glanced nervously at Levi, who had set aside his rifle but remained watchful. "He's waiting a ways down the path. Wouldn't come all the way up." Clara made hasty introductions. Emily extended her hand to Levi, who took it with careful respect. "You must be frozen," Clara fussed, guiding her sister to the fire. "What could possibly bring you out in such weather?" Emily warmed her hands by the flames. "Father's gone to Denver on business. He won't be back for a week." Her eyes held a mischievous gleam. "It was my only chance to see you. Does he know you've written to me?" Clara asked, preparing hot tea. "No, I've kept your letters hidden." Emily reached into her coat, withdrawing a small package wrapped in brown paper. "Merry Christmas." "A few weeks late, I'm afraid." Clara unwrapped the gift, finding a beautifully knitted scarf in shades of blue and grey. "You made this." Clara touched the soft wool wonderingly. "I started it the day after you left." Emily watched Clara's face anxiously. "I wasn't sure when I'd see you again." Levi moved quietly to the door. "I'll check on the horses." "Give you privacy." After he left, Emily leaned forward. "Clara, is it true? Are you really choosing to stay here?" Her eyes traveled around the cabin, taking in its rustic simplicity. "Father says you're being stubborn, that you'll come to your senses when winter fully sets in." Clara wrapped the scarf around her neck, its warmth a tangible connection to her old life. I'm not being stubborn, Em. I'm being honest with myself, finally. She touched her sister's hand. I know it's hard to understand. Is it because of Mr. Hale? Emily asked directly. Are you attached to him? Heat rose in Clara's cheeks. It's complicated. So there is something. Emily's expression held no judgment, only curiosity. He seems different from what Father described. Less savage, more honorable, Clara supplied. He is. The most honorable man I've ever known. Emily studied her sister's face. You've changed, Clara. There's something different about you. I found something here I never had at home, Clara explained, struggling to articulate the profound shift in her life. Purpose. A sense that what I do matters. That I matter. Not because I'm Samuel Weston's daughter, but because of what I can contribute. Emily's eyes grew thoughtful. I envy you that clarity. Clara squeezed her sister's hand. Enough about me. Tell me everything that's happened since I left. For the next hour, Emily related family news and town gossip. Howard Spencer had become engaged to the banker's daughter. Their father had expanded the ranch, buying neighboring properties. The town continued to speculate about Clara's wilderness exile. Father still refuses to speak your name, Emily admitted. But I've seen him reading your old poetry books when he thinks no one's watching. A lump formed in Clara's throat. Despite everything, she missed her father. Not his control or expectations, but the rare moments of warmth he'd shown when she was small. The storm outside intensified. Emily glanced nervously at the windows. I should go. Mr. Peterson will worry. In this weather. Impossible, Clara insisted. You'll stay until it passes. When Levi returned, stamping snow from his boots, Clara explained the situation. Without hesitation, he offered, I'll sleep in the lean-to with the firewood. You two take the cabin. That evening, the sisters talked late into the night, huddled together on Clara's pallet like they had as children. Emily's presence brought a bittersweet reminder of all Clara had left behind. He loves you, Emily said suddenly as they prepared for sleep. What? Who? Clara asked, though she knew perfectly well whom her sister meant. Mr. Hale. I see it in how he watches you when you're not looking. How he anticipates your needs without being asked. Emily's voice held certainty. And I think you love him too. Clara stared into the dying firelight, unable to deny her sister's observation. Even if that were true, what future could we have? Father would never accept it. Since when has Clara Weston let anyone, even Samuel Weston, dictate her heart? Emily smiled in the darkness. The sister I knew before would never ask such a question. Clara fingered the soft scarf around her neck, Emily's words echoing in her mind. Perhaps her sister was right. Perhaps the strength she'd found in these mountains extended to matters of the heart as well. In the morning, the storm had passed. Levi prepared coffee, while Emily readied for departure, her brief visit coming to its inevitable end. Promise you'll be careful, Clara urged, embracing her sister tightly. Don't let Father discover you came. I can handle Father, Emily assured her with a confidence that made Clara proud. Just promise you'll keep writing. As they watched Emily's sleigh disappear down the mountain path, Levi stood beside Clara, his presence solid and reassuring. She has your spirit, he observed. Clara touched the scarf, a tangible reminder that some bonds remained unbroken despite distance and disapproval. Yes, perhaps more than I realized. February brought the fiercest blizzard Clara had ever witnessed. For 3 days, snow fell so heavily that daylight barely penetrated the cabin's small windows. Wind screamed around the corners, finding tiny gaps in their insulation despite their careful preparations. Worst I've seen in years, Levi observed, adding more wood to the struggling fire. The flames flickered weakly against the pervasive cold. Clara wrapped herself in Emily's scarf, huddled near the hearth. Since her sister's visit 3 weeks earlier, she'd found herself contemplating Emily's parting words about Levi's feelings and her own. Each shared glance, each small kindness between them seemed weighted with unspoken meaning. Will the roof hold? Clara asked, as a particularly violent gust rattled the cabin. Levi nodded, though his eyes traveled upward with concern. Roof's sound. It's the chimney that worries me. The chimney, a crude stone structure Levi had built years earlier, had begun to lean slightly under the storm's onslaught. More alarming was the increasing amount of smoke backing into the cabin rather than drawing upward. If it collapses, we lose the fire, Levi explained grimly. Without fire. In such weather, survival became questionable. They both understood the implications, without discussion. After checking outside as best he could, Levi returned with frost clinging to his beard and a decision in his eyes. We need to rebuild the hearth. Strengthen it from inside, now. During the storm? Clara asked. No choice. He was already moving supplies, rolling back the bearskin rug to expose the dirt floor around the fireplace. Fire's not drawing properly. Chimney's shifting. For the next hours they worked in grim determination. Levi carefully banked the existing fire to maintain some heat while they worked. From the lean-to, he brought stones he'd collected months earlier for future projects. Clara mixed clay from a barrel they kept for repairs with straw and ash to create mortar. The work was punishing. Each stone needed careful placement, the mortar applied evenly, despite the cold that made their fingers stiff and clumsy. They labored side by side, passing tools, holding stones in place for each other, their bodies necessarily close in the confined space. Like this? Clara asked, positioning a particularly stubborn stone. Lower on the left, Levi directed, his hand briefly covering hers to adjust the placement. The casual touch sent warmth through her that had nothing to do with physical exertion. As evening deepened the gloom to full darkness, they worked by lantern light. The cabin's temperature had dropped dangerously during their renovations. Clara's teeth chattered despite her exertions. Almost finished, Levi encouraged, his breath visible in the cold air. The final stones formed a new lip around the existing fireplace, reinforcing the structure from within. When at last Levi rebuilt the fire, they watched anxiously as smoke first billowed into the room, then gradually found its proper channel upward. It's working, Clara breathed, relief flooding through her as the flames grew stronger. Levi nodded, satisfaction evident in his tired eyes. Should hold now. They sat exhausted before their rebuilt hearth, shoulders touching, watching the fire regain its strength. Heat gradually returned to the cabin, though Clara still shivered from hours in the cold. Without comment, Levi rose and retrieved every blanket they owned, creating a nest of sorts before the fire. He gestured for Clara to join him in this makeshift arrangement. In earlier days, she might have hesitated at such proximity. Now she simply settled beside him, accepting when he wrapped a blanket around them both. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for knowing what to do, for keeping us safe." His arm around her shoulders tightened slightly. "We did it together." The simple acknowledgement of their partnership warmed her more than the fire. They had faced a threat and overcome it, not as protector and protected, but as equals, each contributing their strength. They sat in comfortable silence, watching flames dance across the stones they'd placed with such care. Outside, the storm continued its assault, but within their reinforced shelter, Clara felt unexpectedly secure. "I've been thinking about what Emily said," she ventured, surprising herself with her boldness. "About why I choose to stay here." Levi turned slightly, his expression questioning. "She thinks it's because of you," Clara continued, her heart racing. "And she's partly right." His eyes, illuminated by firelight, studied her face with careful attention. "Only partly. I stayed first because I found something of myself here," Clara explained. "Independence, purpose. But now," she gathered her courage, "now yes, it's also because of you." The confession hung between them, changing everything and nothing simultaneously. Levi's hand found hers beneath the blankets, his calloused palm enveloping her smaller one. He offered no grand declarations, no flowery sentiments, only the simple, profound connection of his fingers intertwining with hers. "Good," he said softly. The single word containing volumes. They remained thus as the storm howled its fury against their sheltered world. Two people who had begun as strangers, thrust together by circumstance. Now bound by something of their own choosing, the hearth they'd built together radiated steady warmth, a testament to what they could accomplish side by side. Like the stones now mortared firmly in place, something fundamental had been permanently altered, made stronger, more enduring. Clara leaned her head against Levi's shoulder, feeling the solid reliability of him. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. For tonight, this was enough. March brought the first whispers of spring to the mountains. Icicles dripped from the cabin eaves, and patches of earth emerged from beneath melting snow. After the February blizzard, something had shifted between Clara and Levi, a tentative acknowledgement of feelings that had been building for months. They hadn't spoken further about Clara's confession by the fire, but their daily interactions carried a new awareness. Hands lingered during the passing of tools or dishes. Gazes held a moment longer than necessary. The careful distance they'd maintained gradually dissolved into comfortable proximity. One afternoon, while Levi checked his traplines, Clara took advantage of the solitude to clean the cabin thoroughly. Winter's confinement had left dust in every corner, and the promise of spring inspired renewal. As she swept beneath Levi's pallet, her broom dislodged a small wooden box she'd never seen before. Simple but finely crafted, it clearly held items of importance. Clara hesitated, respecting Levi's privacy, but curiosity eventually won out. She opened it carefully. Inside lay a small collection of treasures: a smooth river stone, a carved wooden bear, a tarnished silver button, a folded letter, and a pocket watch. The watch caught her attention immediately. Gold-cased and obviously valuable, incongruous among Levi's otherwise humble possessions. Clara lifted it reverently. The case was engraved with intricate scrollwork surrounding the initials J.H., Jonathan Hale, Levi's father. When opened, it revealed a delicate face with Roman numerals and an inscription: "Time passes, love endures." My mother's words. Clara startled at Levi's voice. She hadn't heard him return. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, returning the watch to its box. "I shouldn't have pried." Rather than anger, Levi's expression held only a quiet solemnity. He crossed the cabin and sat beside her on the floor. "It's all right." He took the box, removing the watch again. "Been meaning to show you anyway." Clara watched as he handled the timepiece with careful reverence. "It was your father's." Levi nodded. "His father's before him. Only thing of value my family ever owned." "It's beautiful," Clara said softly. "Father carried it every day. Said it reminded him that each moment matters." Levi's thumb traced the engraving. "He gave it to my mother as a wedding gift." She added the inscription. Clara was touched by this glimpse into his family history. In all their months together, Levi had shared little about his parents beyond the bare facts of their deaths. "What were they like?" she asked gently. "Your parents?" Levi was quiet so long that Clara thought he might not answer. Then, haltingly at first, but with growing ease, he began to speak. "Father was a dreamer. Came west seeking gold. Found only enough to buy this land. Mother was practical. Taught school before they married." A faint smile touched his lips. "They argued sometimes, but always made peace before sunset. Father's rule: never let the day end on anger." Clara listened, entranced, as Levi shared memories long kept private: his mother's garden, his father's storytelling, the music they'd made with a handmade fiddle on winter evenings. "They taught me everything," he concluded, "except how to live without them." The simple statement held such raw truth that Clara's throat tightened. Without thinking, she reached for his hand. "You taught yourself that part. And you did it well." Levi's fingers curled around hers. "Not always. First years were hard. You survived," Clara said. "That's what matters." He shook his head slightly. "Surviving isn't enough. Took me too long to learn that." The watch gleamed between them, its steady ticking a gentle reminder of passing time. "Is that why you kept it safe but never carried it?" Clara asked, intuiting the reason. "Because it represents more than survival?" Levi's eyes, usually so guarded, held a quiet wonder at her understanding. "Didn't feel I'd earned it yet. Father said a man needs purpose beyond just living." something to measure his days against. "And now?" Clara asked softly. His gaze held hers steadily. Now I understand what he meant. The implication hung between them, clear yet unspoken. Clara felt the significance of his sharing this piece of himself, not just the watch, but the memories and meaning attached to it. "May I?" she asked, holding out her hand. Levi placed the watch in her palm. Clara closed her fingers around it, feeling its weight, the physical embodiment of his heritage and hopes. "Your parents would be proud of the man you've become," she said with quiet certainty. Something vulnerable flickered across his features. With deliberate care, he took the watch back. But instead of returning it to its box, he slipped it into his pocket. "Time to start carrying it again," he said simply. As evening approached, they moved through their familiar routines with newfound awareness. The sharing of the watch had opened a door between them, Levi allowing Clara to see the depths he typically kept hidden. Clara recognizing the significance of his trust. When they sat before the fire that night, the distance between them had diminished further. Clara leaned against Levi's shoulder, his arm coming naturally around her. No words were necessary as they watched the flames dance, the pocket watch ticking softly in Levi's pocket, measuring moments now filled with purpose. April's warmth transformed the mountainside. Snowmelt fed rushing streams, and tender green shoots pushed through damp earth. After winter's isolation, Clara and Levi ventured farther from the cabin each day, assessing winter damage and planning spring improvements. Their relationship had blossomed with the season. What began as survival necessity had grown into something neither had anticipated, a partnership of equals, deepened by shared hardships and quiet moments of connection. One mild afternoon, they worked together, planting a vegetable garden larger than the previous years. Clara's hands, once soft and pampered, now moved confidently through the soil, marking rows and setting seedlings with practiced care. "We'll need more beans," she noted, mentally calculating their needs for the coming year. Their coming year. The thought no longer seemed presumptuous. Levi nodded, using a sharpened stick to create furrows. "Could expand toward the south. Gets good sun there." The easy domesticity of the moment was shattered by the sound of approaching horses. They both looked up, instantly alert. Visitors were rare, especially without warning. 3 riders appeared around the bend, ranch hands Clara recognized from her father's employ, led by Foreman Jenkins. Their expressions were grim, their posture unwelcoming. Levi stood, positioning himself slightly in front of Clara. She touched his arm reassuringly and stepped forward. "Mr. Jenkins," she greeted the foreman. "This is unexpected." Jenkins dismounted, removing his hat in a gesture of forced politeness that didn't reach his eyes. "Miss Weston, your father sent me. Is he ill?" Clara asked, genuine concern flooding her despite their estrangement. "No, ma'am. He's in fine health and fine temper." Jenkins reached into his coat, withdrawing an envelope sealed with her father's distinctive wax impression. "He instructed me to deliver this personally and await your return with us." Clara accepted the envelope, breaking the seal with steady fingers. Inside was a single sheet of expensive stationery covered in her father's bold handwriting. "Clara, your childish rebellion has continued long enough. Nearly 6 months have passed since I arranged your stay with Hale, ample time for you to have learned your lesson and regained your senses. I have been patient beyond reason. That patience is now exhausted. You will return home immediately with Jenkins and resume your proper place and responsibilities. Your continued absence has become a source of intolerable gossip. Howard Spencer has married elsewhere, but Judge Wilson's son has expressed interest in a suitable arrangement. Should you persist in this foolishness, I'm prepared to pursue legal measures against Hale for your detention. No backwoods trapper can withstand the financial and legal resources at my disposal. This is not a request." Samuel Weston. Clara read the letter twice. Her father's imperious tone so familiar it almost made her smile despite the threatening content. How distant that world seemed now, a place where men like her father issued commands and expected immediate compliance. Well? Jenkins prompted, his impatience evident. The other ranch hands shifted in their saddles, hands resting uncomfortably close to their holstered weapons. Clara folded the letter carefully. "Please thank my father for his concern, Mr. Jenkins. However, I won't be returning with you." Jenkins' face darkened. "Miss Weston, your father was explicit. We're not to return without you. Then I fear you'll disappoint him." Clara's voice remained calm, though her heart raced. "I'm not being detained. I choose to remain here." Jenkins' gaze shifted to Levi, who stood silent but watchful. "Hale, be reasonable. You know who Samuel Weston is, what he can do. He'll bring the law down on you." "No law against a woman choosing her own home," Levi replied evenly. "A woman living unchaperoned with a man?" Jenkins scoffed. "The judge will see it differently." Clara stepped closer to Levi, their shoulders almost touching. "Mr. Jenkins, please convey to my father that I'm well and happy. I'm grateful for his concern, but firm in my decision." "He won't accept that, Miss Clara." Jenkins' expression held genuine concern beneath his gruff exterior. "He's determined, and when Samuel Weston sets his mind to something, I know my father's determination quite well," Clara interrupted. "It appears to be a family trait." Jenkins sighed heavily, replacing his hat. "This isn't over. He'll come himself next time, likely with the sheriff. That's his choice." Clara stood her ground. "Please have a safe journey back." The men departed with reluctant backward glances, clearly uncomfortable with failing their mission. Clara watched until they disappeared from view, the letter trembling slightly in her hand. "You all right?" Levi asked quietly. "Yes." Clara handed him the letter. "But this isn't idle threatening. My father never bluffs." Levi read slowly, his expression darkening. "What do you want to do?" The question, so simple, so profound in its respect for her autonomy, contrasted sharply with her father's demands. In that moment, Clara's lingering doubts vanished. "I want to stay," she said firmly. "This is my home now." She hesitated, then added, "with you." Levi folded the letter, his eyes holding hers with steady certainty. "Then we'll face what comes." They returned to their gardening, but the afternoon's peace was gone. Clara worked mechanically, her thoughts racing. Her father possessed influence enough to cause serious trouble, not just legal harassment, but potentially forcing her return through court orders or manufactured charges against. "Levi, he'll try to paint you as my captor," she said as they finished the planting. "Make it seem as though you've held me against my will." Levi nodded grimly. "I know. We should prepare," Clara decided. "Seek legal advice, perhaps, in case he follows through." That evening, as they sat before the fire, Clara found herself studying the life they'd built together, the repaired cabin, the newly planted garden, the comfortable routines they'd established. For the first time, she recognized how precious it had become, how fiercely she would fight to preserve it. The threatening letter lay on the table between them, a stark reminder that their mountain sanctuary wasn't as isolated from the world as it sometimes seemed. Challenges were coming, perhaps the greatest they'd yet faced. "We'll ride to town tomorrow," Levi said. "See what can be done." Clara nodded, grateful for his steady presence. Whatever came next, they would face it together, no longer captor and captive, but partners in a life of their own choosing. The town lawyer offered little encouragement. Mr. Fulton, a thin man with spectacles perched on his nose, reviewed their situation with frank pessimism. "Samuel Weston has considerable influence," he explained, shuffling papers on his cluttered desk. "If he claims his daughter is being held against her will or is mentally unfit to make decisions, the court might well side with him regardless of the facts." "That's absurd," Clara protested. "I'm a grown woman of sound mind." Fulton's expression was sympathetic but resigned. "Miss Weston, frontier courts give fathers significant authority over unmarried daughters, particularly in matters of residence and marriage. There must be some recourse," Clara pressed. Fulton hesitated, glancing between them. "There is one solution that would make Miss Weston legally independent of her father's authority." "What's that?" Levi asked. "Marriage." The lawyer adjusted his spectacles. "A married woman's legal guardian becomes her husband, not her father." The word hung in the air between them. Clara and Levi carefully avoided each other's eyes. "I'll consider all options," Clara finally said. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Fulton." Outside the lawyer's office, Clara and Levi walked in uncomfortable silence. The suggestion of marriage as a legal tactic, rather than a matter of choice, cast a shadow over what had been developing naturally between them. "We don't have to decide anything now," Clara said as they prepared for the journey home. Levi nodded, his expression unreadable. "Let's head back. Storm's coming." The ride home was subdued, each lost in private thoughts. Dark clouds gathered over the mountains, matching their somber mood. They reached the cabin just as the first raindrops fell. That evening, Clara busied herself with mending, while Levi worked silently at the table, a small piece of wood taking shape beneath his knife. The lawyer's words echoed in her mind, making her question everything. Would marriage to her be merely convenient for Levi? A solution to a problem rather than something he truly desired? "I won't trap you," she said suddenly, setting aside her sewing. "Into marriage, I mean?" Levi's hands stilled. "Is that what you think?" "Mr. Fulton suggested it as a legal strategy. But that's not. It shouldn't be." She struggled to articulate her feelings. Levi returned to his carving, his knife making precise, delicate cuts. "Marriage isn't something I ever expected for myself," he said quietly. Clara's heart sank. "I understand." "No?" He looked up, his eyes meeting hers directly. "You don't." He set down his knife and stood, crossing to the fireplace where he stared into the flames. "After my parents died, I stopped thinking about the future. Just survived day to day." His hand moved to the pocket watch he now carried. "Didn't consider having a family. Sharing my life." Clara watched him, the firelight illuminating the strong lines of his profile. "Then you came," he continued, his voice low. "Angry, determined, beautiful." The simple word, beautiful, spoken in his deep voice, made Clara's breath catch. "Changed everything," he finished, turning to face her. "Not just the cabin, me." Clara stood, drawn to him by the raw honesty in his words. "Levi, I don't want to marry you because of your father or some lawyer's advice." His hands, always so steady with tools and weapons, trembled slightly as he reached for hers. "If we marry, it should be because we choose each other. Nothing else." Clara's eyes filled with tears, not of sadness but profound recognition. This man, so sparing with words, had just given her his most eloquent declaration. "I choose you," she whispered. "I have for months now." Something transformed in Levi's expression, tension easing, certainty replacing doubt. With deliberate care, he reached into his pocket and withdrew something small. "Been working on this," he said, placing a tiny wooden fox in her palm. "Meant to give it to you when I found the right words." Clara examined the carving, marveling at its delicate details, alert ears, bushy tail, intelligent eyes that seemed to hold a hint of mischief. "It's beautiful," she breathed. "But why a fox?" A rare smile touched Levi's lips. "Reminded me of you. Clever, adapts to survive, beautiful." The simple comparison touched Clara deeply. That he'd observed her so carefully, seen qualities she herself hadn't recognized until her time in the mountains. "I was thinking," Levi continued, his thumb gently caressing her hand where it held the fox. "We could ride to the mission church next week." "If you're sure." Clara closed her fingers around the carving, its edges pressing into her palm, tangible proof of Levi's feelings, carved in hours of silent devotion. "I'm sure," she answered, certainty filling her voice. "Not because of my father or the law, but because I love you." The words, once spoken, seemed to have always existed between them, unvoiced but present in every shared meal. Every lesson, every quiet evening by the fire, Levi drew her closer, one hand cradling her face with exquisite gentleness. "I love you, Clara Weston." When his lips finally met hers, it felt like the culmination of a journey neither had anticipated, but both had been traveling since that first difficult day. The kiss was tender, unhurried, a promise of all that might lie ahead. Outside, rain fell steadily on the cabin roof they had repaired together. Inside, By firelight, two people who had begun as strangers, thrust together by circumstance, sealed their commitment to a shared future, not from necessity, but from choice. The wedding was planned for simplicity, a small ceremony at the mission church with only the minister and his wife as witnesses. Clara wore her best dress, carefully mended and adorned with wildflowers. Levi had traded extra pelts for a new shirt, crisp white cotton that made his sun-darkened skin appear even more bronzed. "You look beautiful," he told Clara as they prepared to leave the cabin. The words still new and slightly awkward on his tongue. Clara smiled, adjusting his collar. "So do you." They rode toward town with lightness in their hearts, the mountain spring surrounding them with renewal, a fitting backdrop for their beginning. The threat of Samuel Weston's intervention remained, but they had chosen not to let fear overshadow their happiness. Fate, however, had different plans. They were halfway to town when riders appeared on the path ahead, 5 men on horseback, Samuel Weston at their center. Clara's breath caught at the sight of her father after nearly 7 months' separation. He sat rigid in his saddle, expression thunderous beneath his wide-brimmed hat. "Father," she acknowledged as the groups converged. Samuel Weston's gaze swept over her, lingering on the flowers in her hair, before shifting to Levi with undisguised contempt. "You've gone too far, Hale," he spat. "Seducing my daughter was bad enough. I won't allow you to trap her into marriage." "Father, stop," Clara intervened. "No one is being trapped or seduced. This is my choice." "You're confused, Clara." Her father's tone softened marginally when addressing her. "This experiment has gone on long enough. It's time to come home." "I am home," Clara replied steadily. "With Levi." Weston's face darkened. "I've brought Sheriff Miller. He has papers authorizing your return to my custody until a judge can assess your mental state." The sheriff, a weathered man with apologetic eyes, produced an official document. "Miss Weston, I'm afraid I need to insist you come with us." Levi edged his horse closer to Clara's, his voice low. "We make a run for it, they'll follow." "Could be dangerous." Clara studied the determined set of her father's jaw, the nervous hands of the ranch hands on their weapons. Violence simmered beneath the surface of this confrontation. "No," she decided. "I won't risk anyone getting hurt. There's another way." She turned to her father. "I'd like a private word." Reluctantly, Samuel Weston dismounted, following Clara to a spot beneath a pine tree, out of earshot, but within sight of the others. "You're embarrassing yourself and our family name," he began before she could speak. "Father, listen carefully," Clara interrupted. "I love Levi Hale. I've agreed to marry him today. You can force me back to the ranch, lock me in my room, put me before a dozen judges, but I will never consent to any other marriage." Weston scoffed. "This mountain madness will pass once you're home." "It won't," Clara stated with quiet certainty. "And consider this, drag me home today, and every person in 3 counties will hear how Samuel Weston had to force his daughter back at gunpoint because she preferred a trapper's cabin to his grand house, her father's." Expression faltered slightly. "The gossip you feared," Clara pressed. "This will make it 10-fold worse. Is your pride worth that price?" Before he could respond, a commotion erupted behind them. One of the ranch hands had moved too close to Levi, who stood defensively beside their horses. "Back off," Levi warned, hands raised but ready. The ranch hand sneered. "Make me mountain man." What happened next unfolded with alarming speed. The ranch hand lunged, Levi sidestepped, and within seconds 3 men were grappling with him, while the sheriff shouted for order. Clara ran toward the melee, her father close behind. "Stop this!" she cried, trying to reach Levi as he fought to keep his feet against the 3 larger men. A wild punch caught Levi's jaw. Another tore his new shirt from collar to waist. Still, he refused to throw a punch that might escalate the situation further. "Enough!" Samuel Weston's commanding voice cut through the chaos. To Clara's surprise, the ranch hands immediately released Levi, stepping back with wary expressions. Levi straightened slowly, blood trickling from his lip, his wedding shirt hanging in tatters. His eyes sought Clara's, silently confirming her safety before facing her father. Samuel Weston surveyed the scene with obvious disgust. "Is this the life you choose, Clara? Violence and squalor with a man who can't even defend himself properly?" "He didn't fight back because he didn't want bloodshed on our wedding day," Clara replied, moving to Levi's side. "That's not weakness, father. It's character." Something shifted in Samuel Weston's expression as he studied them. Clara's protective stance beside Levi. Levi's dignified composure despite his torn shirt and bloodied face. "You truly love him?" he asked, disbelief evident in his voice. "With all my heart," Clara answered without hesitation. Weston turned to Levi, eyes narrowed. "And you? What can you offer my daughter besides a life of hardship?" Levi met his gaze steadily. "Respect, partnership," he took Clara's hand, "and love." A tense silence stretched between them, the mountain breeze rustling through pine branches overhead. Finally, Samuel Weston turned to the sheriff. "The papers were filed under a misunderstanding," he declared. "My daughter is not being held against her will." The sheriff hesitated. "You sure, Mr. Weston?" "I'm sure." His eyes remained cold as he addressed Levi. "Hurt her and there won't be a mountain high enough to hide you." With that final threat, he returned to his horse. The ranch hands followed suit, confused but obedient. Clara watched in stunned disbelief as her father paused before riding away. "Clara," he said stiffly, "your mother would have wanted you to follow your heart. Foolish as it seems to me, it was as close to a blessing as Samuel Weston could manage." As the riders disappeared down the trail, Clara turned to Levi, carefully examining his injuries. "Are you all right?" He nodded, looking ruefully at his destroyed shirt. "Not exactly wedding attire anymore." Clara touched the torn fabric gently. "We're still getting married today, torn shirt and all." Levi smiled despite his split lip, drawing her close. "Nothing's stopping us now." They were married with Levi in his torn shirt and Clara with wind-blown hair. The missions minister raised his eyebrows at their disheveled appearance, but performed the ceremony without comment. His wife hastily arranged wildflowers to complement those already woven through Clara's hair. "I, Clara, take you." "Levi," the words felt both momentous and natural as they echoed in the small wooden chapel. Levi's voice, usually so quiet, rang clear and certain as he spoke his vows. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, his kiss was gentle, despite his bruised lip. They rode back to the cabin as the sun began its descent, casting golden light across the mountainside. Their mountain now, truly home. "Mrs. Hale," Levi said experimentally as they neared the cabin. Clara smiled at the sound. "I like how that sounds in your voice." That evening, after a simple wedding supper, Levi disappeared briefly outside. When he returned, he carried a small metal box Clara had never seen before. "Have something for you," he said, setting it on the table. "Been waiting for the right time." Curious, Clara opened the box. Inside lay a carefully folded document, a land deed made out to Levi Hale for 160 acres of mountain property, including the cabin site. "You own this land?" Clara asked, surprised. She'd always assumed Levi was squatting on unclaimed territory. "We own it," he corrected. "Been paying on it for years. Made the final payment last month." Clara studied the document with newfound appreciation. The date of final payment coincided with their decision to marry. Not a coincidence, she realized. "You were preparing for our future," she said softly. "Even before we knew for certain," Levi nodded, a rare vulnerability in his expression. "Wanted something solid to offer you, something that was truly ours." Clara touched the deed reverently. Her father owned thousands of acres in the valley below, land acquired through inheritance and business savvy. But this modest mountain holding felt infinitely more precious, purchased through years of Levi's patient labor, each payment representing traps set in winter storms, pelts carefully prepared. "Frugal living, no one can take it from us," Levi explained. "Not your father, not anyone." The significance wasn't lost on Clara. This wasn't just property. It was security, independence, a foundation for their life together. After months of uncertainty, of her father's threats and societal judgment, they had something unassailable. "It's perfect," she whispered, overcome with emotion. "Our mountain. There's more." Levi withdrew a folded paper from his pocket, a rough sketch of a larger cabin with a second room, expanded kitchen space, and a covered porch. "Thought we might build something more. When you're ready." Clara studied the drawing, recognizing the care that had gone into every line. "You've been planning this for some time." "Since winter," he admitted. "When I knew I wanted you to stay forever." She traced the outline of the proposed cabin. "When can we start?" Levi's expression lightened, relief and joy mingling in his usually stoic features. "Timber needs cutting. Could begin next week." Clara set aside the papers and moved around the table to him. Their first night as husband and wife stretched before them, no longer separated by the blanket partition that had maintained propriety for so many months. "I have something for you too," she said, taking his hand and leading him to her trunk. From its depths, she withdrew a carefully wrapped package. Levi unwrapped it, revealing a new shirt she'd been sewing in secret moments, simple but finely made, with careful stitching along the collar and cuffs. "Been working on it since spring," Clara explained. "I thought you might need something new for special occasions." Levi touched the fabric with appreciation. "It's fine work. I'm not just a pampered rancher's daughter anymore," Clara said with a smile. "I've learned a few useful skills up here." "You've learned more than skills." Levi's hand cupped her cheek. "You found yourself on this mountain." The truth of his observation struck Clara profoundly. She had arrived angry and helpless, thrust into punishment. Now she stood confident and capable, having chosen this life and this man with clear eyes. "We found each other," she corrected gently. Outside, twilight deepened into night. Inside their cabin, legally theirs now, Clara and Levi stood on the threshold of their married life. The deed and plans lay on the table, tangible promises of their future together. Levi drew her close, his arms encircling her with the careful strength she'd come to treasure. "Never thought I'd have this," he confessed, voice low near her ear. "A wife. A true home." Clara leaned into his embrace, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her cheek. "I never thought I'd find freedom in what was meant to be a cage." His lips found hers. In the gathering darkness, their kiss deepening with new-found permission. The walls that had witnessed their journey from strangers to partners now held the promise of something richer still, a love built steadily. Like their cabin, one careful piece at a time, the land deed might secure their property. But it was their entwined hearts that truly made this mountain home. Autumn painted the mountains in fiery hues once more, marking a full year since Clara's arrival. The expanded cabin stood proudly in the clearing, its new addition complete just as the first frost dusted the high meadows. Clara arranged preserves on the expanded pantry shelves. Admiring how sunlight filtered through the new window Levi had insisted on installing. "To catch the morning light you love," he'd explained. Their garden harvest had been bountiful, their cellar now stocked for the approaching winter. So much had changed in 12 months. The frightened, angry girl who'd arrived by force had blossomed into a confident woman who knew exactly where she belonged. The silent, solitary mountain man had opened his heart and his life, finding words where once there were only guarded silences. Clara paused at the sound of approaching horses. Through the window she spotted a familiar figure, her father riding alone up the mountain path. "Levi," she called, her heart quickening.